Welcome to the Rise to the Challenge podcast. Join me today. He's the host of the Grind.Sell.Elevate podcast, a sales mentorship and consulting entrepreneur, and the vice president of an insurance company. It's Tyzer Evans. How are you doing today, Tyzer?
Good, Alex. Thanks so much for having me on.
I'm excited to learn all about your rise to the challenge. First thing we like to do with all of our guests is go right to the beginning, talk about where you're from and what were you involved in growing up.
Yeah, no, I'd be happy to. So I'm from Cloverdale, California. Probably nobody listening to this has heard it unless you're from there. So I grew up in Sonoma County, the last city in Sonoma County. It's a town of about 5,000 people. What's really interesting, it's beautiful, right? I grew up in the vineyards, set on the Russian River. We've only got 3 stoplights in my hometown. So, yeah, people tend to get into a little bit of trouble. So. And that's kind of, my childhood was interesting. It was very country. I lived in a double wide out on a middle of nowhere, 8 miles outside of my hometown. Both my parents had struggled with addiction most of my childhood. So I had a, really kind of extreme childhood to some degree, kind of interesting. But, there were a lot of good parts. It was very safe where I grew up. So I spent a lot of time outdoors. I grew up in a very much a hunting, fishing, car building family. I didn't get any of those genes by chance. So I lived there until I went to college. I went to college down in San Diego, and I just kind of never looked back. I left at 18, and I just had made up my mind early on that I saw how people would get trapped. A lot of people start using drugs or drinking just because they get bored in those small towns. There's not much to do. They have kids young, they get into addiction issues. And it's not everybody, but a lot of people. And I just said, hey man, I want to be able to create a life that's something different. And so I just had promised myself I would get out the first opportunity I had. So I graduated high school in June and was gone in August. And, and just kind of bounced around since then.
Growing up in that small town, did it teach you a lot about yourself or things that you had to learn, like life skills, quicker because of the atmosphere you were living in?
Yeah, definitely. So, it's interesting being in sales. One of the things I don't talk about very often as I should, but growing up in an, somewhat of an extreme environment, I'm always like, I'm not someone that likes to live in their story, right? I don't see myself as a victim. I saw myself as probably someone that I need to go through this experience for my own growing and learning lessons. But when you're in a state of fear a lot as a little person, you develop a really keen sense of other people's emotions. And, like, did I smile wrong? Did I say the wrong thing? Is that going to set somebody off? Did I give someone the wrong look? If I just happen to be in the room, maybe that's not good for somebody. And so as I got older, it actually really played to my benefit in sales because I'm able to pick up on body language and tonality much, much, much better than my peers, which gave me a competitive edge in sales because I'm able to really tell people when I'm losing them in a sales process or when they're thoroughly engaged or when I'm being too aggressive, I need to back off. So that was, a big life skill that I learned early on was to have it just kind of came innately was to have for really safety was to have a high EQ. It was one of those things and really something that our kids are really missing right now. And I have a 4 and 6-year-old boy, little boys. And so I try to instill in them is like, it's okay to be bored, right? Like growing up in a town with 1 pizza joint, 1 high school, 1 elementary, we had 3 schools. Like those are the schools you went to. There's no movie theater. There's no mall. All that stuff was 40 minutes away. So you had to learn how to entertain yourself. And it helped me to be a really creative person as much as I'm a logical person. So I got really into creative writing and drawing. And so I think that that's helped with the podcast, right? You got to have a creative mind to be able to build a brand. And I've started a few businesses. And so I think that that was another skill that helped me just have that imagination play when I was smaller because we didn't really have an option.
I think you brought up a great point with understanding body language and stuff, because that's a huge thing that a lot of people aren't taught in when they're growing up or in classes. And I think nowadays with the whole social media and stuff, people are worried about kind of saying the wrong thing and I think with sales, it definitely helps because you're able to analyze those situations and know what direction do you need to go in instead of taking a longer route to get to that spot you wanted to be in. With your parents going through the addiction, was there anyone that you could reach out to and like be able to help you in any situation?
Yeah, so both my grandparents, my mom's parents, and my dad's parents were a little bit farther away, and I wasn't as connected with them, but they were there if I needed them. But my mom's parents, I became really, really close with, and they became my safety net. And like it just, yeah, those were my fondest memories as a child, was going to their house on the weekends, and that was the only time I ever ate out at restaurants. Like I went to movie theaters, I'd go to the mall. I tell this people, and I cannot remember really a time that I ever went out as a family to a restaurant to eat dinner. It's just not something we couldn't really afford it. So that's something we did. So that was like a big luxury. Although, it's a different perspective now as an adult who's made money. But I thought like Applebee's, the places they would take me, and I thought that was great. I thought that was like a luxury.
Hey, there's nothing wrong with Applebee's.
You're right. So Olive Garden, hit up the OG and, crush all the breadsticks or Red Lobster. But yeah, they were very instrumental. And my grandfather was a great role model for me and a very safe male figure that I depended and relied on a lot.
Are there things that you're taking that you didn't have the opportunity to do with your family that you're utilizing today with your family that you're doing, like eating as a family, making sure you're spending those times with each other?
Oh, definitely. It's hard, as busy as my life is. I was telling you before we got on camera that my wife was getting her hair done in downtown Houston, which is about 45 minutes from where I live. And it was just me and the kids. But this, I don't have on, like my cell phone. I put it down and I walk away, and I'm very present with them. So we're out playing basketball and, jumping on the trampoline, we're out riding bikes. So I try to be very present with them to help nurture them and to grow them. We go usually every Friday, we go eat out at a restaurant as a family. My wife grew up the polar opposite of I did. She grew up very, very well to do, and her parents have been married for 37 years. And so she was fortunate. Her parents were able to take her all over the world to travel. And so that's something I always wanted to do. So the first vacation we ever took my son on, he was 3 months, my oldest, the first time I was on a plane, and we went to Vail. And so, we take them, there's a lot of people that say like, oh, you got to travel before you have kids. And I was like, that's stupid. Like, travel with your kids, culture your kids, and if you start them young, my 4 and 6-year-old, they get the drill. They push their suitcases. They know that you go through TSA, like they know the drill now. And so we don't have those growing pains, but they've also traveled a lot. They both of them probably been on a plane over 40 or 50 times, and they're 4 and 6. So yeah, so I've done it differently. Exact opposite of what I went through.
Growing up, did you have any inspirations or someone that motivated you to keep going and following the path that you wanted?
That's a great question. Definitely I'd say my aunt, she was, she had some of her own problems that she went through in her 20s, and she really broke out and never went to college or anything, but became an entrepreneur at 35, and then went on to make, multi-millionaire and owned real estate and had several businesses. And I got to see a little bit of the other side. She lived in San Francisco and then eventually San Diego. So it was a little bit farther from me, so I didn't get to spend as much time with her, but I got to see this other kind of lifestyle, and it really intrigued me. And I was like, oh, wow, she has a cool house and has nice cars, and she travels all over the world. And that's something about that just was like, I want that. And I didn't know why. I think it wasn't so much the material things or even the traveling. It was just the freedom that I really enjoyed it. And she was a really good mentor to me throughout high school, and especially through college and early on in my career.
Growing up, we always are asked that question, what is that dream job? What was that dream job for you?
It's funny now that I think about it. Now that I was going to play in the NBA.
Hey, we all have those dreams that we hope to accomplish, and then it changes path out of nowhere.
Yeah, well, coming out of high school, being 6 foot and 170 pounds, I wasn't really getting scouted right and left. With like a 30-inch vertical, not your typical basketball player, but I did learn a lot. Basketball was a saving grace for me in my life because it was allowed me to be able to escape my problems and be able to get out of my own head. It taught me a lot about becoming a leader. It taught me a lot about teamwork. It taught me a lot about discipline, and all those skills I've been able to apply in my life. And so I'm really grateful. I went hardcore. I went to camps all over. I was on traveling teams. I was a decent player. So it taught me a lot, but never made it to the NBA.
What brought you to pick basketball? Was there something that caught your attention?
It's interesting. I've always had this little chip on my shoulder. I still do it. I just turned 37 last or 2 weeks ago, and I still got this chip on my shoulder. I don't know if it'll ever go away. I think it's one of those things that always propels me. So I always played on what we called the A team. You got A, B, C teams, right? And I always started because I was naturally a good athlete, but I was never like known as like the best player. And I don't know, as like a little person, I was like fourth, fifth grade. I kind of ate at me. And so I just made up my mind going the summer between fifth and sixth grade. I'll never forget it. I just made up my mind that like I was going to be the best basketball player on the team. And I just went out and I don't know what clicked. And I just said, I'm going to do this. And so I got my dad somehow to buy me a hoop, which was rare for us to be able to spend that type of money. And I spent 5 to 8 hours a day for a whole summer, just playing. And then I came back that summer and I was one of the best basketball players on the team, or I got bumped up grades to play. And so, that I don't know where that drive came from, but that it showed me that if you apply fanatic discipline to whatever you want, you can go to the next level. You just have to work for it. And that was the first thing in my life that I go, oh, I just got to work real hard and I can get good at anything. And so I've just kind of taken that mentality that I learned at 12 and applied it to everything in my life.
Did you feel you had to prove something because of that?
Yeah.
Was it more personal, or was there someone out there that was telling you that you couldn't do it?
Yeah, I think because of kind of I had a bit of a tumultuous relationship with my stepfather. And like I was always like the real poor kid that was picked on for the clothes I wore. I didn't ever have the Nikes because we couldn't afford them and those types of things. And so I don't know if I can swear on this show, Alex.
You can.
Okay. But I was kind of like, fuck all these people. And I'm going to show them. And so that was kind of like, I took that in basketball and I took it in high school with my grades. And I was like, fuck them, I'm getting out of here. And so, yeah, I don't know. I can't really explain where that came from, but I just kind of wanted to prove everybody wrong that doubted me or had made fun of me that I will become something, and you're all going to watch me do it.
I think in my situation, kind of similar. I think kids judge based on your physical appearance and stuff. And I was never the athlete look, but I always called myself a wild card. Like, you never know what you're going to get out of me until I get onto the field. And then if I was picked last, I'm like, okay, well, you're going to regret that decision. And
Right.
usually that's what happens. And I think as I gotten older, every time someone told me I can't do something or you're not going to be able to do something, I'm like, okay, watch. And I think especially with the show, I've been able to prove so many people that doubted me and tell them, look what I've done. I have no experience. I did this all by myself and I'm proud of myself. It was something to prove for myself. So I kind of can relate to that with what you were going through.
Yeah, no, it's incredible what you've built. It's not easy running a podcast. People don't appreciate the amount of time, especially if you're doing your own editing, which I'm sure that you do. And you're making your own videos and your own trailers, and that takes a lot of time. I know, it takes a lot of time. So I completely respect what you've built.
I love when people are like, you have 2 jobs basically. I go, but no, when I'm done with my first job, I come and do this and I'm happy. It's like a positive thing for me, but I wish people would see the behind the scenes of everything I'm posting because they would realize, wow, you put a lot of effort into that. You kind of mentioned earlier, but talk about the pursuit of your education, going to college. What was the next step for you?
Yeah. So, again, I like to push myself. And so in high school, I'll admit, I was not like valedictorian. I don't have one of those, or I don't have one of those stories, but I was like, I don't know, probably pretty close to top 10 in my class. I was a triathlete scholar. So I always got really good grades, and it was because I had I was in 4 clubs. I did speech and debate. I was ASB vice president. I was in Voices for Youth, Interact Club. I did all that just because I thought it would help my chances of getting out.
Mm-hmm.
And that's all I wanted to do was get out and go to school. And so I just wanted to put myself in the best position to leave. And I did. And it was interesting. So I got into some of the schools I wanted to, and I went and visited them. But because of my handicap and growing up in a town of 5,000 people, going to a college of 35,000 or 40,000 kids honestly scared the shit out of me.
Yeah.
It just, being in a big city, going to a school that was like 6 times the town I grew up in, I was like, whoa. So I ended up going to a smaller college in North County, San Diego, which was beautiful. Now it's a really big school. And so that was a great experience, getting out and living a city life and feeling like that was accomplished something. I'm on my journey. I have no idea where the journey is going to take me. I left my hometown. I worked all summer. I had like $900 to my name. I drove to San Diego, picked up my aunt's van, drove back to San Diego with the van full of stuff. And that was it. Ended up living with 4 guys in an apartment, 2-bedroom apartment. Had to find a job. I worked at lumber yards, 24-hour fitness, got fired from there. That was interesting. I did all kinds of stuff. Worked at a surf shop for a couple of years, got fired from there.
Wow.
Yeah. So, I've had some experiences, man. It's been a fun ride.
Did you want to stay kind of in the same state or close to family that you could still see them, but have your distance away where you could live your own life and build a new chapter?
Great question. No, I did not. I did not want to stay in the state. I got into Chaminade. I'm not sure if you're familiar with it. It's a private school in Oahu. And I thought I would have a realistic chance of playing basketball there. And I also got into Marquette, which is a good school in Wisconsin. And so those were 2 schools that I really wanted to go to. I decided probably Wisconsin, being a California kid, I wouldn't be able to handle the snow well, but going to Hawaii sounded pretty appealing. Yeah. And one of my really good friends was going to the University of Hawaii at Manoa on Oahu. So I would only be a couple miles from her, but I couldn't afford it. And I couldn't afford out-of-state tuition, and no one was going to help me pay for college. And so I figured San Diego is as far away as I could get with still being in state. And be able to afford college. That's what led to my decision.
You talked about living in a 2-bedroom apartment with 4 other people, and you're talking about working, trying to make money. Did you ever have the time for personal time and being able to live a fun life instead of being working all the time?
So I was a super senior, so it took me 5 years to graduate college because I didn't take summer school because I was working, and I just, I went to school 5 days a week, and I usually worked 6 or 7 days a week. So it was taxing to do that. I didn't want to do it during the summer. The first couple of years of college, I was really reserved. I was very straight edge because I saw what addiction problems could do. After I turned 21, I loosened up a little bit, and I ended up having a lot of fun, especially when I worked in the surf industry. I got to have some really unique experiences. I let myself go out and have fun with friends. Obviously, being only 30 miles from Mexico was a good time. And so I was down there often, and I met this guy who ended up becoming one of my best friends. And really interesting how he's had such a big impact on my life. And he's been passed away now for, I think, 12 years. He died at 24. But he was my best friend through college, and he always told me that he was going to die young. We used to have this conversation. I remember we'd go surfing and we'd smoke a little cannabis after we get done, and we'd be having these really kind of deep conversations on the beach. And he goes, you got to live more, man. You got to say yes to everything. He's like, I know I'm going to die young. And so he's like, I just say yes to everything. And that really impacted me a lot. Like, yeah, like I didn't believe him that he was going to die young. So the fact that he did now still kind of creeps me out. But he kind of taught me, like, go hard at everything you do. It doesn't have to be all about work and school. Like, play hard, enjoy your life experiences. And so I did that, and I still do that now. I have a hard time saying no to things that are fun, because it has to be a balance, so definitely.
What was the biggest challenge during your college career?
Just trying to I guess probably being stressed out about money. living in San Diego and it was the first time in my life coming from a town of, it's such a small town where there's not like a lot of wealth there. Although, there are some people that are very wealthy because you're in that winery culture, but none of my friends were. And so I had never experienced that. And I go to San Diego and people driving, fucking 18, 19-year-olds driving new Porsches and Beamers and people judging me because I had an 89 Ford Probe that was maroon. It wasn't like a real chick magnet. So that was, that was interesting. And so money was very scarce because I was making $8.50 an hour at lumberyard when I moved down there. So that was very hard to do. I saw my friends who just were given stuff and had stuff and they weren't working. And so that was very mentally was hard for me to wrap my mind around, although I knew it would give me a competitive edge later on. But that was definitely very challenging. I had to I'd borrow money sometimes to eat. And it's just what it was.
I think that's the hardest part is you see all these people that are given stuff and you realize that you've had to work so hard, but it's going to take you a lot longer. But like you said, it's going to work out in your advantage later in life, because when those kids are cut off, they're not going to know what to do, but you're going to be still grinding and making that money and earning everything that is rewarding in life.
100%. I mean, I with the exception of two friends that are still, I'm my best friends. Nobody has financially done better than me out of my college friends.
Wow.
And I think that was mostly because of that, just that, I'm like, my superpower is I can outwork you,
Yep.
Yeah.
So I have to ask, you said you got fired at a 24-hour fitness.
Yeah.
How did you get fired at a 24-hour fitness?
Yeah, it's not a good story, man. It's nothing. I didn't do anything crazy. Nothing crazy happened. It was just, they have those secret shoppers come in, and I just worked front desk, And so I asked my assistant general manager. I said, "Hey, can you cover for me? I got to use the restroom." She didn't. A secret shopper walked in, and so they see the front desk unmanned. And so they got a terrible review, terrible write-up, it goes to corporate. They're like, who's the guy working the front desk? And so they checked the cameras. They saw me walk out, but they couldn't really tell that I went over and asked her. Long story short, they pulled me into the office and they're going to give me a write-up. And I told the general manager, I go, I didn't do anything wrong. I'm not signing this. And so we got into it, and I basically told her to fuck off and that I could go get another job that pays me $7 an hour down the street. And she goes, well, you should do that because you're fired. I'm like, oh, okay.
So mentally, did that kind of affect you in a way, or were you able to just, okay, moving on now?
Yeah, I didn't care. I was like, like, this is your life, chick. Like, you're 50 and making 50K. Like, okay, that's cool. Like, you know what I mean? It just, I was like, I knew that was never going to be my destiny, was to work at a 24-hour fitness, so, and nothing wrong with that. I made some good friends. Actually, some people I still talk to, actually. But I so I was like, all right, whatever. And then I left and I went and worked for the surf shop, and I had an incredible time and had some incredible experiences doing that. So it was a blessing in disguise.
So as you're getting closer to graduation, what were you finding passions in, or what were you hoping to find career-wise as a job?
No idea.
What were you going to college for?
No idea.
No idea.
Yeah, I literally had no idea. I just knew that I had to go and I had to get this piece of paper. I had no idea what I wanted to do. I thought that I wanted to become a chiropractor. That seemed like a lot of school, and I didn't want to get myself into a bunch of debt any more than I already had. So I decided not to go that route. And my roommate at the time was a little bit older than me. He was been in the military and got out, went back to school. So he was like 6 or 7 years older than me. And he goes, hey man, you should get a degree like I have. I'm doing social sciences. He's like, it's great because you can learn about communication or political science or history. And I was actually really into political science. I did really thoroughly enjoy that in history, but you can't really do much with it unless you're a lawyer or a teacher. So I just got a degree in that. And I was like, well, shit, hopefully this works out.
So after graduation, what was next for you?
So the one thing the surf shop did do before we parted ways was that they actually, it's interesting because you think of like PacSun and Tilly's and those types of stores, right? And then they pay you $8-9 an hour. Well, this one is the largest surf retailer in San Diego County, and they pay people hourly, but they also pay them commission. like a small percentage. And so that was the first time I really like was like, oh, this is cool. Like I can control how much I make based how much I sell. And so I was so always strapped for money that I was like, I ended up working my way up to become an assistant manager. And so I was making like 13, 15 an hour, but with my commission, I was making like 23 bucks an hour, which to me was like an amazing amount of money, at 21, 22, 23. And then I end up being like, I got into their top sales club a couple of years in a row. And then I was like a #1 producer for the store I worked at. And so then I was like, oh, well, maybe the sales thing, I should like, look into this more. I didn't really know it was like a big career avenue. And then so when I graduated college, a friend said, hey, you should check out Enterprise Rent-A-Car. It's a great training program for college graduates. And they teach you how to sell and how to run a business. And I go, well, I want to be an entrepreneur one day. And I'm already pretty good at the selling thing. So, okay, I'll go do that. And so I went and worked at Enterprise Rent-A-Car for 2 years after college.
What's the biggest thing that you learned about yourself going through that program?
Enterprise?
Yes.
It showed me, just kind of we talked about with the work ethic thing, that I was just able to outwork all of my peers. Those hours there are grueling. We got into the office at 6:30 and we're typically done at 6:37, Monday through Friday. And then you had to usually work every other Saturday. And so like, I was like, oh, I get Sunday off. And that was like a big deal because normally I didn't have that.
Mm-hmm.
And so everybody else is like, oh my God, I'm working 12-hour days. And like, I got to come in on Saturday. And I was like, I get a day off now. This is amazing. So that was the first time where I started connecting myself with the top producers, and I would go and interview them, and I would ask my bosses out to lunch, like my boss's boss. I'd ask them out to lunch. Something my aunt had told me to do, and get around successful people and be around successful people, learn what they did. You don't need to reinvent the wheel. You just need to learn from them. And so I did that, and I got promoted 3 times in the 2 years I was there. And so that gave me a lot of confidence, and it taught me a lot about sales. And so that kind of where my career started to lift off.
Was there anything that you learned in college that helped you when you were working for Enterprise?
Yeah, I mean, definitely, how to connect with people. When I moved to San Diego, I didn't know a single person. And like working at the surf shop, learning how to just build rapport quickly, being the new kid on the block, is because, it sounds crazy and not a lot of people had the experience I did, but most of the kids I graduated high school with, I started with in kindergarten.
Wow.
Like 80% of the kids I started kindergarten with, I graduated high school with. So literally in my entire life, I'd never had to make new friends.
Mm-hmm.
They'd always been my friends. And so going to college, that was, it seems silly to say, but like I never had to make friends before, so those skills of learning how to apply, how do you do that? And that all translates to sales, how to strike up a conversation, how to find commonalities, how to read tonality, body language, that speed of language, all those things that a lot of people do on a subconscious level. Some do much better than others. Taught me some great life skills.
You basically were networking before like networking platforms was even a thing during those times.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I had to, because I was like, I wanted to hang out with people, and so I would strike up conversations with people at the gym or in my classes. I found like an open, what do they call that? An open gym basketball. They play on Wednesday nights, like a men's league. So I just joined that and just got put on a team and, met people there. Just did stuff that was, I'd go down to local parks and just playing pickup games and meet people there. Things that were very much out of my comfort zone, but then I was able to start to build a tribe, and that taught me some skills.
Playing those pickup games, was that your way of saying, I'm still playing basketball, but it may not be for the NBA?
Yeah, absolutely. I just love the sport. I built in my backyard, we've got a little half court. And so not quite a half court, but, so I still enjoy it because I have to go out there and play with my kids.
I see your Instagram videos with your kids playing. I'm like, he's probably going to make them become NBA players. It's to live out his dream.
Yeah, we're headed there. And it's really ironic. One of my neighbor, her dad is Rudy Tomjanovich. And so for those that don't know who Rudy T is, he coached the Rockets to two championships and played in the NBA for a long time. And so we got some good basketball genes floating around our neighborhood.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
So after the enterprise, were they trying to keep you full time? But I've heard about this program where they kind of take you somewhere else and you just continue running that, I guess, shop or something. Or were you trying to look at what was that next path you wanted to take?
You know, it's a good question, Alex. I came out of college at a really terrible time. So I graduated college in 2007. And so I walked into a shitstorm of an economy. And and so as I got promoted with enterprise, I really did see myself being a career person there because I love the culture and I like that everybody starts as a management trainee. Every single person that's ever worked there starts in the same position. So anybody that's at the top, you have an immense amount of respect because you know that they earned it. They didn't come from the outside. You know, they weren't handed the position. It was all based on your ability, which I really appreciated. But because of the economy, I wasn't making any money. And so I was number 3 out of 300 as far as reps. And then when I got into management, I turned around 2 stores. And it had not been, it wasn't an enterprise's fault. It's just that industry got crushed. And so I had to start looking for other opportunities. And I had a friend that was working in insurance. And so I got sucked over there, or I probably would have stayed, to be honest.
Was the focus more about having that stability and security with money than trying to live out a passion of yours?
100%. Yeah, I was total scarcity mindset. It took me so many years to try to unprogram myself from that. You know, because at that point, so I was living in San Diego and, you know, and I was living with a couple and we had a 2-bedroom condo and our rent was $1,400 a month and my portion was 6 and theirs was 8. And my first paycheck with enterprise, my net take home was 700. You know, so that would give me $100 to live on for 2 weeks. And I was like, this is not sustainable. And I was crushing their metrics. And so just like, man, I can't, I've lived my entire life this way. I'm 25. I can't do this anymore. I can't do it. And so I had to find something different.
Well, especially with California and like how much cost of living is, $100 wouldn't last that long.
No, it didn't. And I wasn't like I was able to ever improve my savings. You know, still at that time, I probably had $1,200, $1,300 in my savings account.
With the insurance company, were you always trying to think in the back of your head, how can I turn my career now into an entrepreneur? Or was it a slow build to finally get to that moment?
Yeah, no, I always thought that I could. I just didn't know what I wanted to do. That was kind of like what I always thought I would end up doing. But I just, I had a hard time trying to find my passion, I guess. And so insurance was great because then I went from 1 year making 40 grand to the next year making 140 grand. So that was life-changing for me, getting into insurance. But I still was like, I wanted to do something, different and being a little bit more in control. And it wasn't really until I met my wife and my father-in-law has been he's a serial entrepreneur and done very well, that he really kind of helped me get some clarity on my own interest that I could take advantage of. And so it took me a while to get there.
Did you ever worry that with the big increase in money that you would not be able to stay secured with how much you had, or you would be spending a lot more than you were usually doing?
Yes and no. So, it's interesting because most people, when they do level up their income, they level up their bills. I've always been a voracious reader. You can kind of see my books behind me. And so I started to read more as I got into my mid and late 20s. And I started to, and I had some people kind of in my ear, like, hey, you make this, man, like learn to live on your salary and take those bonus checks and put them away. Start a Roth IRA, start your 401k, start to get a little bit of cushion in your life. And so I took their advice and I started to do those things for myself. So I wasn't quite in the scarcity mentality. But even now, I still have to like talk myself out of being freaked out.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's like my wife will, it's like she'll tell me like, hey, Ty, you haven't taken a day off, like quite some time. Like it's okay, we're okay, it's okay. You could take some days off. So that's still, I'm just hardwired programmed that way to just think that I could lose it at any moment. So I got to keep pushing.
I'm that same way. I think when it comes to financials, I mean, you can ask any of my friends, they're like, you're always so worried about it. But I've grown up in a time where my family sometimes didn't have the money. And I'm like, I don't want to repeat that in my life. But the same situation with taking a day off. I just enjoy being busy and working. And then last week I didn't do anything. Like, I mean, besides work, but I came home and it was like, wow, I needed this. It's kind of like a mental reset. But then I'm like, well, I want to get back into it. And it's just, you do what's best for you. But you talked about earlier that you and your wife lived completely different lives growing up. Were you able to be honest with what you were going through to her? And how did she react to that?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think that if you can't be completely transparent with your significant other, then it's not a real genuine relationship, and a lot of people, unfortunately, it's a huge contributor to divorce. Like you're truly living with somebody that you don't know, um, which tends to lead people to seek validation in other places and can destroy a marriage. And so I've always been radically transparent with her with the things that I went through as a kid and, my mindset, my mentality, but she always knew that I wanted to create my life. And she's seen that I work hard at personal development and overcoming those things. Yeah. So we got on the same page about it. And if anything, she's been, someone that's been inspiring because she started several businesses. She has one right now. She's an entrepreneur, and so the way that she views things will give me security because of the way that I can look at her and she's like not freaked out. Like we saw on my Instagram stories, we just did our backyard, right? So that was a lot of money, but we dropped 30 grand in my backyard, and and I was like, oh, like what? We can't get it done for 10 from somebody, and she's like, Ty, it should cost 60. I got us a deal,
Oh,
and she's like, it's not a big deal. Dude. Like we've got plenty of cash. Like it's just get it done, enhance the quality of our life and our kids' life and that type of stuff. And I was coming from a different place where she's like, spend the money. And I was like, oh my God, I need the money, so I still have to and overcome that, those things. And she's really good at helping me walk through them.
was she that person that you needed in your life to kind of let you know that you can take those risks in a way and be able to do what you want to do?
Yeah, definitely her and her dad, for sure. And I would say definitely my aunt, because if you don't take the risk and you don't do the things like then you don't ever grow and you don't have new experiences. And I get so much pleasure now watching my kids play back there, and we've had friends over for barbecues, and like that's worth all the money to me. And I'll get it back. The house is an investment, so I'll get the money back.
So talk about what was that first entrepreneurial job that you had or that company that you had?
Yeah, so it was a company called Craft Loyal that no longer exists, sadly. It's a very sad story. But I said I worked in the surf industry for a lot of years, and so the surf industry is comprised of lifestyle brands, Quicksilver, O'Neill, Ruka, those types of companies, and so I got into making beer. I got into being a home brewer, and that was actually because my father-in-law owned a chain of restaurants. And he goes, "Well, why don't you make beer and learn how to do that, and then we can just put your beer in my restaurants, and you can start your own business." And I was like, well, "That sounds like a great idea. I'd be really into that." Because I was like, really, I grew up. I mean, I grew up, but I lived in San Diego for 10 years. Where my house was a half mile from Stone Brewing Company, which then was still coming up, and now they're one of the top 5 biggest brewers in the world. And so I got exposed to craft beer at a young age, and I could appreciate it and what it took to make. And so as I got into making it, I just got more into the industry and all that. And so I go, hey man, there's like these beer snobs are really hardcore into their glassware, like wine snobs are.
Mm-hmm.
And I go, and there's no one making cool beer gear for like beer enthusiasts, which there are a ton. There's a ton of people in that niche. And so I go, well, if like maybe I just make proper glassware and we can sell apparel with it, but it has like that, you can see my Shepherd Ferry posters behind me.
Yep.
So that's the founder of Obey. And I get best known probably for doing that picture of Obama back in 2008 and the change. And so I go, well, if I just take like an Obey type edginess, but have it all incorporated with beer motif. I wonder if people would be into that. So I hit up my best friend that was a designer, and his roommate happened to be a programmer coder. And I said, hey, like, let's form this company and build a website, and we did. And it ended up popping, sold in 50 different countries all over the world, every state in the United States. Got invited to go to, the Great American Beer Festival, and attended all kinds of events in Southern California. And it was really cool.
What's the biggest thing that running that company taught you about yourself?
I'm much more of a creative than I thought. And I think that was probably the biggest thing, because I already knew I had the work ethic. I knew I had the drive, because that was hard, because I was still working full time, and my wife had started her first business, and we just got married, and we just had our first kid. So there was a lot of moving pieces in my life, but we were able to work through it. But probably just that creative outlet, I really learned a lot for myself, that like I have a pretty good creative eye, and enjoy that aspect of it.
Was that creative outlet always that missing piece that you didn't have before, or was it something that was always you were learning over time?
Yeah, I would always kind of like, before I had basketball, I was a doodler. I would draw a lot as an outlet and an escape, and that kind of like got replaced. And so I think I kind of came back to those creative outlets that I had more as a child.
As you were getting to the end of that company, because you mentioned that it's no longer around, what was the mindset going for you?
So, a lot of things happened. So one of my good friends in Southern California had started a CrossFit subscription box, which still exists now, Gains Box. Shout out to them. It's the largest CrossFit subscription box in the world now. And so my friend, I remember me and my friend Brian, we were talking about it, and we're out at this wedding, and we're actually in Newport, we're on a yacht. It was just, and he was like, I'm going to start this company, and it's going to, we're going to be killing it like you are, blah, blah, blah. And he went like 10X, like they went big, and they went big quick. And so he came to me and said, hey man, we want to take your brand and do what we've done. We've got all the analytics, and we've got some good connections with some good marketing people, but you got to dump your business partner. He's dead weight. And he was. And so I went through this process of trying to buy him out, and he wouldn't budge. He's like, he didn't have a lot going for him. I made a huge mistake with the wrong business partner, which is a lifelong lesson I'll never forget. So then I, in turn, basically said, hey man, if you're not going to let me grow this thing because you don't have any money, I've got money. I want to grow it. I've got guys that want to invest. I'm gonna dissolve it, and I'll just start another one. And I thought that would scare him. Didn't budge. So we went through this battle for 6 months. Long story short, he ended up buying me out. And then he ended up selling it to a brewery, and then it kind of just, I don't know, they just fizzled from there, and the brewery just shut it down eventually.
Was it hard to see it go into the hands of someone else and not in your control, or are you happy about the experience it had taught you and prepared you for that next step in your life?
Yeah, no, I'm definitely not happy with the outcome of it. I'm grateful for the experience, for sure. I mean, it taught me a lot, but it was not happy about it, because I know that if I could have somehow made that separation, or been more diligent, or just hung in there longer and worn him out, that it would be a multi-million dollar business today.
Did you have a friendship with that guy, or did it kind of dissolve over time and you were just more business partners?
Yes, and I honestly was my best friend for 10 years. And I knew that we had different work ethics, and that should have been my first red flag. But I thought that by bringing him along, he'd be inspired to work how I wanted to work.
Mm-hmm.
And it was never the case.
Did it hurt that friendship, having those 6 months of hard time going back and forth with giving it up or taking it over?
Oh yeah, I haven't talked to him in 4 years.
Wow.
Yeah, like no longer friends. Yeah, that cost us their friendship.
For some people that are going through something similar where they're working with their best friends, what kind of advice would you give them to kind of prepare them for negative outcomes that could happen?
I would just say, the biggest thing, it's okay to partner with people that maybe don't have your intensity or your work ethic or your drive. But what you need to do is make, one, you got to have very clear defined roles of who's doing what in the company. And if you know that someone doesn't have the same drive and push you're going to, then you got to have an equity split based on sweat equity.
Mhm.
And that can be very hard to determine up front, but if they're that good of a friend or a family member, you should already know that instinctively. So I should have done a 20, I said a 50-50. I should have done a 70-30 split or 80-20 split. And I knew that in my heart, but because he was my best friend for 10 years, I felt like obligated to give him 50% of the company, which I never should have.
Do you feel that he took advantage of the situation with having 50%?
For sure. Yeah, 100%. Yeah.
So moving on from that company, what was that next path for you?
So yeah, I helped my brother set up a little fly fishing company, and that was just, he still runs it. I got out of it. I just, I wanted to help him get a lift off the ground. And so he's a passionate fly fisherman, and he's been in books, for his the way he does his own ties and whatnot. And he's really talented. And so I helped him start a little company, and then I backed off of it. Now I've helped my wife with both of hers. And then I just launched into doing some consulting work now on the side.
What did you feel was the best impact that you've made with your consulting company?
Taking someone who is making $50,000 or $60,000 and then helping them get to that level of 100, 110, 140, 160. I've had a handful of people I've helped do that. And when you can double your income, it's life-changing,
Mm-hmm.
and watching people do that and buy their first house, buy their first BMW, feel confident to go drop 10K on an engagement ring, those types of things. Really fills me up, a lot.
What feels that you set yourself apart from any other consultants in the world right now?
To be honest with you, and this is not a knock on anybody, it doesn't mean that people don't have an extensive amount of knowledge, but, a lot of the coaches and consultants have never sold. They give you theory from books and shit that they've read. If you go to my LinkedIn page, you can see my track record. You can see my awards because I list them. I've been a top producer and a top producing manager at every single company I've ever worked at. And so my track record speaks for itself. Not a lot of guys can tell you that, hey, I've been number one in the country. Like last year, the last company I was with, that office that I had taken over, they asked me to come to Houston to take it over and to revamp it. In the middle of COVID, I grew that business $10 million and up 74% year over year.
Wow.
And so I would, most consultants out there are not going to have stories like that.
I feel like a lot of people can, and taking that kind of consultant side, people can relate where you sometimes have like a manager that hasn't been in your shoes or doesn't understand what you've gone through in a situation. And it's hard to kind of get motivated in a way. But for you, you have that experience. So when people come to you, they know that you have the knowledge and that you know what you're talking about. You're not coming up with those theories or any way. You actually have been in the fight to grow companies and grow in sales and everything.
Yeah, 100% growing my own. I don't help my wife very much because she's a total alpha little bulldog. But we talk a lot about, we bounce ideas off of one another and strategize a lot. And she's doing fantastic. I mean, she started her business in the middle of COVID. Now is hiring her first 2 employees after being open for 7 months. So yeah, it's just having that experience of building culture, building metrics, building processes, building systems. You can read about that, but to go and actually do it, yeah, it's a completely different skill set.
So you talked about changing, basically going from California to being in Houston. What has been the biggest thing that has helped you by living in Houston?
It's interesting. It's not as pretentious, although you do get a bit of that. And this is not for all California. I know some great Californians. Obviously, I'm a native, so I don't want to talk a bunch of shit. But I just tell you this. So my first night here, or one of my first night, it was one of my first month in Houston, and we rented a place because we didn't know what area we wanted to live in. We wanted to fill up the city. So, and we actually only live a mile away now, and we love this area. And so my neighbor was watching. Consequently, I grew up a Golden State Warrior fan because I grew up, 80 miles north of San Francisco. and they were playing the Rockets in the playoffs. And I heard my neighbor over there, and he's got a pool, and he got this like, big TV out there, and he's got a bunch of friends over, and I could tell they're having a good time. And I was outside in our backyard watching it on my phone because I just didn't want to be inside. It was a beautiful night. And so I just cruised. I was like, I had been drinking a little bit, I'm not gonna lie. I had a couple beers, so I got a liquid courage, and I cruised over to his fence, and I knocked on his fence, and he opens up and he goes, "Hey, you the neighbor guy?" And I go, "Yeah, man, my name's Ty." And he goes, "I'm Kevin." He goes, "Come on in." And he goes, "Oh, you brought beer, good man." He's like, "But don't worry, we got a shitload of that." And then, next thing I know, it's 2:30 in the morning. Me and Kevin are on a golf cart looking for alligators on the golf course we live on, and I was just like, but that's just, just how Texas people are. A lot of them, they're super warm and welcoming. And, it's not a pissing contest like you get a lot in Southern California with who drives what and how much money you got, how fake is your wife, how much plastic she got on her, so, so I've enjoyed that part about Texas.
That sounds like a fun night, except I wouldn't want to find an alligator if I was driving in a golf cart.
No, it was stupid. But we did have fun driving around the golf cart, and we never found the alligator, thank God. They're all in the bayou.
But I think that's so true nowadays with, again, social media nowadays, where everyone's taking a photo of their fancy new gadgets, their new cars, and it kind of makes people start feeling bad for themselves because, oh, I don't have that, or I'm not living that lifestyle, and people are trying not to be authentic. And it sounds like when you went up right to that person, kind of like with sales, you never spoke to that neighbor, but you just knocked on that door, and you kind of ended up finding a bond in what you guys were watching.
100%. I think it's what life's about, man. It's about knocking on doors. Sometimes, it's there's this saying I heard that I really loved, that if someone closes the door on you, go through the window. It's always about creating your own opportunity in life. Life doesn't owe you anything was a post that I put on Instagram yesterday, because it doesn't. You get from life exactly what you put into it. And people have a hard time accepting that. And that's why we get this cancel culture, victim type mentality. It's just like, you got to go take stuff, and you got to open up your own doors, and you got to be, at least a wherewithal to accept when the door is open for you. Because a lot of times people will be scared to walk through them. So for me with life, it's just like, yeah, why wouldn't I go knock on it? I could meet my best friend. You don't know.
I think that's so true, because now and I kind of live by the motto of, like, with rejection, like, you can't be afraid to try something and regret not trying. I think, especially with my show and getting guests, it's like you kind of have to reach out there and find people. You never know who will say yes. And I have found people that I've looked up to, I've watched on TV, I've idolized, and they've said yes. And I'm speaking and having conversations with them. And I never thought in a million years I would be doing that. And it's all about like your motto, you got to find your own opportunities in a way. And it's so rewarding when you're able to accomplish something that you didn't know you could do it at the beginning.
1,000%, Alex. Most people are waiting for someone to come knock on their door and say, "Hey, here's an opportunity." That shit doesn't happen. And so they let life pass them by. They get resentful. They get angry. They develop addiction, drinking problems. They go cheat on their spouse because they think that the grass is always greener, as opposed to just taking life by the balls and going and creating their own opportunities. And that could be scary, could be fearful, but it's like, what would you? I don't want to die with regrets. Ed Milet talks about that when he dies, that he wants God to introduce him, or no, he says that when he dies, he doesn't ever want God to introduce him to the man he was supposed to be. He wants him to get up there, whatever you're, I'm not a, like, I don't want to go into Christianity or spiritual realm, but whatever God is to you, right? The cosmos, the universe, whatever it is, they'd be like, "Great job, man. Like, you maxed out on all the gifts that I gave you."
Mm-hmm.
And so that's just kind of what I'm after, is just maxing out my own potential, whatever that is.
I think both of us are similar in a way where we're not waiting for things to get handed to us. We're going to go out there and get what we want, or at least try to go get what we want.
100%. At least you tried. At least you can say, like, I'm never going to be left with the lingering question of what if.
Yep. I don't want ever to have to say that. What if this happened? I'm going to be like, what now? What am I going to do to make it happen?
100%.
So talk about your podcast that you host. What is the mission and what are you hoping the listeners get out of it when they're listening to it?
Great question. So the podcast, probably like you, has been an interesting journey for me. I started it 3 years ago, and it was because I truly believe in the law of reciprocity, of giving back as much as possible. And you can see, like, I try to get on social and post as much as I can, but there's days I just totally forget. I just totally forget because it's like I get so tunnel visioned. And so with the podcast, I was like, well, it started as a YouTube channel, and I was like, I'm good at sales. I know that I'm good at sales. I've helped a lot of people. I want to be able to reach more people, and I want to be able to help and impact people's lives and help them make more money, change the quality of their lives. I don't want them to feel like how I felt as a child. I don't want people to go through that. And so it was a way for me to be able to just info dump on the knowledge that I had. And so the first 95 episodes, man, I didn't have anybody on. It was just me talking, and 5 to 15 minutes about my morning routines, or how to get out of a slump, or how to get around a gatekeeper. And then as it grew, people started asking me, I'm sure, like, people hit you up and said, hey, you got a platform, can I come on it? And then it kind of morphed into like, oh, well, I bet like people probably tired of hearing about my journey. And my journey is unique to me, but there's always so much I can tell people over and over in just 30 different ways. Right. Mm-hmm. And so I was like, maybe I get some other guys on here and gals on here that have their own unique life experiences and skill sets I don't have, and make more of an impact. And so I started doing that about 8 months ago, and that's helped the podcast to explode, to be honest with you. So it shows that people like other people more than me.
What's the biggest thing you try to get out of when you're interviewing a guest?
Like, you've done a great job interviewing me. I want to commend you for that, because you ask very thoughtful and insightful questions that are sincere. So I really appreciate that about you. And so I try to do, I'm probably not as skilled as you are at it. But
don't put that pressure on me.
But I just try to dig a little bit, like ask, fair questions, but they can be hard questions that people can really actually get info from, that they can apply in their life, or they can apply in their business.
I think for me, the one thing I always do with every guest is I try to get one thing I can learn from them that I can utilize in my life. And every guest, even if we're in completely different lifestyles, industries, I'm always able to take something that they've learned or that they've shared and utilize it in my life. And I think that's the best thing. I love learning. That's why I love talking to people. And I think during this time where we're all, like, obviously you and I are not in the same state, but the power of Zoom or video call, we're able to learn from each other and connect and networking, and the power of social media. And I think that's the best part that this has given me. This platform is learning. I mean, no one comes into something knowing everything. I can admit to that, but we can always learn something new every day.
100%. And I think people should be striving to do that. I mean, it's crazy. How many people I made my team last year, and it was I think one of the keys to our success was nobody reads anymore. Nobody reads, and so I made my team do a book club, and they all bitched about it, right? And I go, yo, read. All you got to do, a 300-page book. You read 10 pages a day. It'll take you 15 minutes, and it'll change your fucking life. And now it's funny because every single person on that team reads every day without, like, I don't even work there, and I know they're reading because they're texting me about books, and they're shooting me books, and they're buying me books, right? Which is great. I got a great library. But yeah, you should learn every day.
I'd probably be one of those employees complaining about reading, because the only thing I read is social media posts. But one of my friends wrote a book, and it was like the first book I picked up in like years. But I got a message from a friend that says, "Oh, you're in this book." And I'm like, "Really?" And I'm like, "Okay." Now I'm reading this whole book trying to find that one part that I'm in. But it's kind of like nice, because it's kind of like you're not looking at your phone, you're not on your computer, you're not watching TV, but it's peace and quiet. But don't tell my mom I said that, because she'd be like, "You don't read." And I'd be like, "Well, things change nowadays."
Things change. And I'll tell you, one of the best things you can do too, if you get in the habit of reading, if you're listening to this, you read the 10 pages, take out a journal, and then write down the one thing that you learned. because taking the pen to paper helps to submit it into, into action. I don't know what the statistic is, but it's like you have a 70% retention if you actually write it down. So after I read my 10 pages, I journal. And that really helps to cement what I just learned in my takeaways.
That must be why I didn't do well in English classes, because I wasn't retaining it. Also, probably the books were not interesting to me.
Yeah, there's that as well. Yeah.
Looking back at your career and your journey so far, is there anything that you would have done differently, or do you enjoy the outcome because it's taught a lot about yourself?
That's a good question. Yeah, I would say, when I first got into insurance and even a little bit with enterprise, I wish I would have pushed myself a little bit harder. I relied a lot on my skill, my natural born ability. I think that I'm a pretty decent listener. I've gotten a lot better. I think I can conversate pretty well with people, make people feel at ease with having them open up to me. And so in the EQ we talked about, so those things came naturally, but I didn't really like set up scripts and learn talk tracks. And I wasn't super keen on metrics. And a part of me never thought I would be a corporate America guy. So I kind of had this chip on my shoulder, like, fuck them. They don't really care about me. So whatever, I'll fucking, I'm going to get mine. And then I don't really give a shit if I always made the top producer trips and stuff, but I didn't ever push to be number one. I'd be like top 10 out of 800, which is great. But I could have been number one. And so I look back and go, no, I should have been pushing myself, because I would have learned more about myself a lot sooner had I really gone all in on myself and really tried to hone my craft much earlier in my career.
Do you feel that to push yourself, you needed someone to help you push yourself? Like, I know some people like to have competitions, like fun games with a coworker to see who can do the most. Do you feel that you needed that, or someone in your corner pushing you? Or do you think that there is a different way that could have pushed you?
I think it's important to have mentors. And I think that if I would have had the right mentor who would have been in my ear to say, like, hey, you're capable of more and you're letting yourself down right now, that probably would have made me be a bit more self-critical about what I was doing. I do like to compete a lot, but that whole saying that it's always you versus you is very true. Right. Because I think that sometimes the skill sets are uniquely different. And I've seen a lot of people do this and they'll be like, I'm gonna crush you this year. And I'm like, there's some people that I'm like, yeah, you'll probably beat me. There's other people I'm like, you won't fucking come close to me, because we have different skill sets. Right. And so it's not about beating me. It's not about me beating everybody else. It's, it's about just being a little bit better every day. Like, we're talking, and I have that, you can't see my arm, but on the inside of my arm here, I have every day written in Gaelic as a reminder, tattooed on my arm, that every day I just want to be a little bit better. And so it's just, it's like I heard Ed Milet talking about this again. Ed Milet, I'm in the art. You saw the Arte Syndicate. So, he's talking about a thermostat, and a lot of people sit at 75. But if you can get to 77 and break through and feel comfortable there, then you're going to stay at 77. Because we have this thing, that homeostasis in our mind, that by the time we're 7, we've already kind of made up our self-belief of what we're going to do in life. And unless you rewire your brain, most people have identified themselves, I'm only worth 60 grand. And so they may lose their job and they'll go find another job that makes 55 or 60, but they'll never find one that makes 80 or 100. Mm-hmm. Right. But if you have a job that makes $250,000, you lose that job, sure shit, you're going to find another job that makes $250,000. So, to break through that governor, or, to get to that next level, the thermostat, I think you got to keep pushing yourself and growing a little bit every day, and get a little bit uncomfortable. And people have a hard time with that. And I didn't do that in my 20s, and I've done that in my 30s. And since then, my life's exploded with a lot more success.
So what does the future look like for you? What are you hoping to accomplish personally and professionally in the next few years?
Professionally, it's a great question. I'm not sure. I'm just kind of, and I've got, I write down my goals every morning, and, like, I don't know if you want, I'll read them, but, my goals, my one of my goals this year is to make 750,000. But I will make 750,000 plus. I will be worth $50 million by the time I'm 45. I will weigh 185. That's my wife's request, not mine. I'm 199 right now. I will have 1 million downloads for my podcast. I will own several rental properties, and I will continue to be the best husband and father that I can be. And so I write those down every day. And so I don't know that I have a particular, like, I need to be a CEO of this or that. It's just like, I keep trying to manifest those types of opportunities. And when new opportunities come into my life, then I'm not afraid to walk into them and see what they bring me.
Do you feel with them being written down, it pushes yourself and makes you strive to want to accomplish them more?
Yeah, for sure. And it's one of those things that it keeps it front of mind, but also, I write it in the first person as though I've already accomplished it, because the brain cannot tell the difference between you visualizing something and what is reality, right? And so the more that I can visualize myself and tell myself that I've already done it, the more it will be so, because my brain will not be able to distinguish the difference between me thinking it and it actually happening.
The final question I'll ask you, based on your journey and experience, for someone that's listening to this interview, what tips or advice would you give them to accomplish their goals, overcome obstacles, and rise to the challenge?
To lean into your fears. That's always my message. Every time that I've been scared to do something and I've leaned into it, which has been a lot in my life has gotten exponentially better. And I can give you 2 quick examples. When I was living in Southern California, I got a great job opportunity, but it was in Atlanta before I came to Houston. And I had to take a 6-figure pay cut in order to potentially make a lot more. And I had to move across the country. My wife sold her business, so I went from 2 incomes to 1, plus minus down 6 figures. Plus I dropped $100K on my house and renovated my house. So then I was fucking like, oh shit, I just spent like a shitload of cash. And I got 2 small kids that depend on me and a family. And that was and I never lived in the East Coast, so there was like so many, just like, oh my God, what am I doing? What am I doing? What am I doing? And I just kept leaning in, dude, you got to do this, man. You got to do this. You got to do it. You got to do it. You got no other choice. And I did. And I crushed it. And I leveled up on every single level, and did the same thing when I moved here to Houston. Did the same thing when I took this new gig, did a new VP gig. Same thing. I was making fantastic money. Most people would never walk away what I just walked away from, but it was to get to the next level. And so I'm just not going to sit and rest. And even then, I was scared shitless walking into what I'm walking into right now. Completely scared. But I was just like, I just got to lean in. And a lot of people, they don't lean in, and then they lead mediocre lives, and they look back and they have that, fuck, what if I would have moved and done something abroad? What if I would have started that business I always thought about? What if I would have started that podcast? Well, just fucking do it. Be scared.
It's almost like kind of like the butterfly effect in a way. Like, you kind of have those moments where you're like, what if I went in that direction? What would my life be like? And I think that's the hardest people, that they live in fear because they don't want to make the wrong decision. But nowadays you learn from those decisions that you make that don't go exactly how you thought it would be.
100%. Yeah, dead on.
Well, Tyzer, I want to thank you so much for coming on the show and talking about your rise to the challenge. We're excited to see what the future looks like for you.
Alex, likewise. I'm excited to continue to watch your journey, man. You're doing a great job.